here. Okay, guys, so in the case of inheritance, we have the constructor that comes in the basic class or the parent class, plus we have another constructors that will be exist in the derived class. Okay, so now derived classes, the child derived classes can have their own constructors and destructors. You can have, as we have explained earlier, that when you execute this code, we have a constructor. This one constructor will be called when you create what? When you create this object. When you create this object, so you will see the constructor here. It will be called first, then this constructor will be called second. Why we need to call two constructors when we call this object, when we create this object? Why we have to call the parent? The reason is that because you have these parameters, so you have to allocate memory. Constructor, you always mean that you will initialize the parameters and you allocate the memory. So maybe this memory is static on the stack or dynamic if you create the object using the new. So if you have used the new, so meaning that your constructor will create the object in the heap. If statically called like this, so this is static object, so you will have two parameters in the stack. So this is the key idea why we must have two constructors, one for the basic class and the second one for the derived class. This one also need to allocate a memory here. So that's why you call this one first, then this one. Okay, clear this idea why in the case of inheritance, you have to call automatically, the compiler will call the basic class constructor. All right, I hope it's clear for you. So now you can implement the constructor, it's up to you. You can implement two destructors if you have dynamically allocate the object in the derived class. If you create a pointer here, so you will allocate memory here dynamically from here and here. All right, so when an object, you see, when an object of derived class is created, so what's happening here? The basic class constructor is executed first, as we have explained previously in the coding. When you execute the code, you see first the basic class will be called, then the derived class constructor will be called. When an object of derived class is destroyed, so the destructor is called first, then it's the opposite in the case of reallocating the memory. So in that case, if you call the destructor, so this one will be destroyed first, then this one. It's the opposite of the construction. Destruction is the opposite. Okay, clear this point for the destructor. Destructor is the opposite of the constructor. Okay, so we have example here. So we have the basic class first. So this is the basic class. It's very simple class you just created. This is the constructor of the basic class. So inside the constructor, we print out this statement. We have the destructor now. So this is our destructor in the basic class. When this destructor will be called, So you will see this C out in the output. So now this is the derived class. As we have explained that in the case of the inheritance, you have to use the colon. Then you have to identify the accessibility. Is it public or protected or private? In the case of this one, change to be private. So the lowest will be applied if you have here protected variable here. So meaning that if this is private, this is protected, so private will be applied. This class will see as a private here, as we explained earlier. So now we have another constructor here, which is used in the derived class. This is the destructor of the derived class here. All right, so now in the execution, you will see this is the first line will be printed out in the output. So you will see this is the first line here. No constructor right now. So now you are creating the object of the derived class. So what you will see first, you will see the constructor of the base class. You see here the constructor of the base class first. Then the constructor of the derived class second. Okay, once you go out, you return out from the main, the destructor will be called. So after this line, you will see what? You will see the opposite. It is the derived class first. So you see here the derived class last, but here first. The basic class first here, but here is the last in the case of destructor. So it is the opposite. Okay. Any question about this idea? Which one will be called first? All right, so passing argument to the basic class constructor. So how you can pass parameters to the basic class. So this allows selection between multiple basic class because it's allowed to do multiple inheritance. Later we'll see you can also make inheritance from another class. So you can have multiple inheritance. This is another class. We have another class here. So you can pass parameters to these classes, the base classes. So now allow the selection between multiple basic classes. So you'll select and you pass the parameters, which one you passing to, specifying argument to basic class on derived class. Constructor heading must be done if base class has no default constructor. So you see here, this is the derived class here. Okay, and this is the constructor here. This is the constructor of the derived class. So you see, when you pass parameters, you have to use the colon. It's very similar to the syntax here. If you remember the composition, it's very similar. You have to use the colon, then you have to call the constructor. So you are passing parameters to the constructor. So this is the constructor will be called here. Okay, but it's the same. We don't have default constructor. We have only this constructor. We don't have the default. So this is the meaning of no default constructor must be done if no, this is the condition. You must have only this one. Okay, you cannot implement the default one without parameters. So this is the condition here. Must be done if base class has no default constructor. Okay, so this is the syntax to call the constructor. It's very similar to the case of the composition. When you make composition, you call the constructor using this syntax. You have to use the colon, then you call the constructor, base class constructor. So this is the derived class. Okay, so if not using the style, so what we have here, so this is the basic class constructor. This is the implementation here. So this is the constructor implementation here. Then we have the derived class. So the derived class implementation is here. Okay, so basic class constructor divide derived class constructor. I think this is the end, just how to call the basic class constructor. Which one is called first? I think already we covered in previous lecture. What's remaining in this part? We have redefining the basic class function. It's some kind of overriding. So overloading here. Then we have the multiple inheritance. You have this is the parent, this is derived here, this is derived. Then we have this multiple inheritance here. If you want to, it's the opposite, multiple inheritance from this one and this one. Sorry. So you can see here we have this is the basic class and this base class and derived class here. So in the case of derived class, we have multiple inheritance. So this is syntax. Later we will discuss, just I will show you here what's the remaining part of this chapter. I think this is the end. Multiple inheritance is the end of inheritance. So now you can see if you have multiple inheritance in UML, so you have to use in your design. If you have a hierarchy like this or a multiple inheritance, so you have to check if you can see there is any relationship between the classes, so you have to utilize. Okay, guys, any question about this part, what I have discussed here, how to call the constructor, and to see which one will be called here? This example is clear for you. Any question before I end this quick lecture? All right, I assume it's clear for you. If no question, I have to stop my sharing here and share with you the attendance. This is a soft reminder. Next, we have class Monday. We will have class also to finalize the inheritance. Then on Tuesday, we have the test. I will remind you in the group about the time. So I hope all of you will be ready on time. Okay, guys, so this is the end for today session. I have to stop my sharing here.
Doctor,
Yeah.
for project